بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يرزقنا حسن النية. We ask Allah تبارك وتعالى to grant us all the sincere intentions. In our previous session, we spoke about the merits of Ramadan, the reward that is multiplied, and the great opportunity that is for a person to learn, to gain a high rank, and so on. Fasting in the month of Ramadan is among the greatest of obligations. It's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he mentioned the 5 greatest matters of Islam. So it was mentioned as one of those, and it's very rewardable. And we are going to go through the details of this, insha'Allah. Like I mentioned at the end of the previous session, who is obligated to fast, who is excused, what invalidates the fast, when does the fast start, when does it end. We're going to go through all of these, insha'Allah. Allah revealed in the Quran in ayah 183 of Surah Al-Baqarah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ. O you who believe, fasting has been made an obligation upon you. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ, just as it had been made an obligation upon the Muslims that came before you. So Muslims from previous nations, Muslims that followed the prophets that came before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they also fasted because they were ordered through the prophets by Allah to do so. But none of them were given the whole month of Ramadan to fast. This is something that is specific and special for the Muslims of this nation. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That a person, Allah revealed that this month has been made an obligation upon you, and what we should do in this month is to adhere to the rules of the religion and try to become pious through this month. It's important to understand the matter. The Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wassalam mentioned in an authentic hadith, in a sahih hadith, narrated by Ibn Hibban. So the scholar of hadith, Ibn Hibban, narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ. He said there are many people that fast. لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعَ. Many people that fast, they take nothing from their fasting except hunger, because their fasting is invalid. Their fasting is invalid. So neither is their fast valid, number one. Number two, they don't attain any reward. And number three, because they haven't learned how to fast properly, they commit a major sin. They are committing an invalid act of worship, and this is not allowed. For a person to not know how to pray and then to just do something that they think is the prayer, this is not something that is permissible. This is considered an invalid worship. Ibadah fasida. Like that, one is not allowed to neglect learning the rules of fasting and then to just act, hoping that Allah would accept. Because Allah sent the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam for this very reason, so that he would teach and so that people would learn. And he said alayhi salatu wasalam, وَرُبَّ قَائِمٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ قِيَامِهِ إِلَّا السَّهَرِ. And some people would stand in prayer, many people would stand in prayer in the night. So the optional prayers, they would stand in the night while everybody else is asleep. They would have been asleep and then they woke up before Al-Fajr to pray. But the only thing that they would achieve from standing up in prayer is that they stayed up at night, that they woke up at night, meaning that they do not benefit from standing in that prayer because their prayer was not valid. They didn't learn how to pray a valid prayer. Again, we emphasize that a person must exert themselves to learn the bare minimum of the rules of the religion. It's not enough for a person to have been through, for example, for 2 or 3 years, a madrasa system when they were young, and then to think that that will suffice them for the rest of their life. This is not enough, because a person goes through different stages in their life. When you're young, when you're in the madrasa to recite Al-Quran, you might have some religious advices that are given, some lessons how to pray, how to recite Al-Fatiha. But in the madrasa, you're not taught about debt, for example, or when you borrow some money, or getting married, or buying a house, or buying a car. You don't learn about these things. You don't learn about what happens when somebody dies, how the inheritance is split, and how certain people have more of a right than others. So it doesn't suffice for a person just to go to the madrasa, go through the madrasa system, even if it's a good madrasa. It doesn't suffice for them to become 13 years old, graduate as it were, and then to think that they're set for life. This is not the case. So we always are in need of religious knowledge. Always. Like we gather here once a week. We gather once a week, and this is fantastic. We top up our knowledge, we review, we might hear something new that we didn't know before. And this is something that the Prophet loves, alayhi salatu wasalam, for us. He said, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, utlubul ilm, seek knowledge, walau bis-sin, even if it means that you've got to go to China to go to get it. Now you might say, okay, I'll get on a plane. I don't know how long it takes, what, 12 hours to get to China from here, direct flight, if there are direct flights. In the past, among the Arabs, one of the farthest places that they could think of was China. So when the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, seek knowledge, even if it means you've got to go to China, this really emphasized for them the importance of knowledge. Some of the things that I'm going to mention today, I remember when I learned them, I was very, very surprised. Because I didn't know that that's how it was. I just assumed that it was a certain way, and then I found out that it was another way when I started to learn the Islamic knowledge. So the Islamic months, okay, so just like we have the Gregorian calendar and the months, January, February, what comes next? It seems like only one person spoke out there. What's after February? March, okay. So 2 people there. January, February, March, okay, this is the Gregorian calendar. For the Islamic rules, we go by another calendar. And this is the lunar calendar. The Gregorian calendar, January, February, March, all the way up to December, this is according to the sun. So it's a solar calendar. Islamically, we follow the lunar calendar, according to the moon. And something that came as a surprise to me was that the Gregorian months, January, February, and so on, these have a set number of days, except February, okay. Every 4 years it has an extra day. But they have a set number of days. January has how many days? 31. 30? 31. I don't think there's any month that's got 30. Is there? I need to review these months. Okay. So, January, March, April, May, June, they have a set number of days. So, whatever March had last year, it has this year. Whatever March had in 2015, when you were all a little younger, some of you probably weren't even here in 2015. Then March had the same amount of days. Okay? But in the Islamic calendar, the months Muharram, Safar, Rabi'un al-Awwal, Dhul Hijjah, Dhul Qa'dah, and so on, they can change every month. So, the Islamic months every month can either be 29 days or 30 days. That's it. Like, for example, 2 years ago, let's say Ramadan had 29 days. The year after, which was last year, let's say it had 30 days. This year, it might have 29 or 30. So we can't tell beforehand how many days it's going to have. And like this is every Islamic month. Muharram, for example. It might have had 30 days this year. Last year it might have had 30 and 30 before that, and then 29 before that. So the Prophet ﷺ is the one that taught us how to determine the months. Okay? So they're either 29 or 30 days. And the way that we determine the new month is by looking for the new moon. It's something that is referred to as the new moon. There's also something that is referred to as the old moon. Okay? When do we see the full moon? When do we see the full moon in an Islamic month? Is it in the beginning, in the middle, or the end? In the middle. Like you see, for example, when I was younger, for some reason I thought that at the beginning of the month, when you see the new moon, that's the full moon. It's not the case. Okay? So you can see it on the 13th, 14th, and the 15th of the month. So, this is how the Prophet instructed us, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said that when 29 days have passed, actually to mention something here, remember Islamically the night comes before the day. So right now this is considered to be Thursday night. Okay? So the night comes first, and then the day comes afterwards. Okay? So today would be Thursday night, and tomorrow would be Thursday day, if you will. Tomorrow when the sun sets, that's Laylatul Jumu'ah, Friday night. And then Friday day will be that which comes after the night. So the Prophet ﷺ taught us that when 29 days have passed of a month, Islamically, if 29 days have passed, how many nights have passed? He said 29. Any? Yeah, 29? Who thinks it's, let's see, who thinks it's 29? Put your hand. Okay, who thinks it's what else could it be? 30? It's not 30. Okay? Because we said, didn't we? If one day has passed and the night comes before the day, then it must mean that one night and day has passed. So 29 days have become complete. How is the 29th day complete? By the setting of the sun. So if the sun is set, 29 days have gone by. And with them, 29 nights have gone by. The Prophet taught us, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, go and look for the new moon. Where do you look for the new moon? You look in the west. Where the sun has set, that's where the moon will rise. See, that's something else that I didn't know in the past. The moon rises. Where the sun sets, the moon rises. I remember once I looked at the moon, and it was a full moon. It was during the middle of the month. It was in a certain position. So let's say I was in a particular place, and I looked and I saw the moon. I thought, mashallah, it looks nice. A few hours later, I went back to that place, and I looked there, I didn't find the moon. I didn't find the moon. So then I looked around the sky and then I found it somewhere over there. I thought, huh? It was over there. How did I get over there? I didn't know that the moon moved. So the moon also, just as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, like that the moon also rises, but it rises in the west and it sets in the east. So the Prophet instructed us, alayhi salatu wassalam, that after 29 days have passed, we go and we look to the western horizon. After the sun has completely set, we look for the new moon. The new moon, where we are in the northern hemisphere, it looks like a backwards C. So if you think about a C, A, B, C, think about a C and you turn it around. That's what it would look like, a thin crescent. So if I draw it for you, it would look like this. Just like this. To me, it would look the other way, of course. It's backwards C. So this is called the new moon. The new moon isn't a full moon. As the month progresses, day 2, day 3, day 4, this crescent gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker until it gets to the middle of the month, and that's when it becomes a full moon, and then it starts to wane. It starts to get thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner, and the old moon therefore looks like a crescent, but it looks like a C, a capital C, a letter C. So if you're looking for the moon, you would look in the western horizon as the Prophet taught us, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said that when you go and look for the new moon, if you see it, so there are no clouds, or there might even be clouds, but there might be a break in the clouds, or it's a clear sky. He said, if you see the new moon, then this means that this month was 29 days, and this night is the first night of the new month. And when the sun comes up, or when Al-Fajr comes, that will be the first day of the new month. And that goes for every month. He said, alayhi salatu wassalam, if you do not, however, see the crescent, then what do? You say, okay, this month that we just passed the 29th of its days, it is actually a month of 30 days. So tonight is the 30th night. Tomorrow's day, if you will, is the 30th day. And then when the sun sets, that night will be the first of the new month. So he taught us, alayhi salatu wassalam, that the month, every Islamic month, every lunar month is either 29 or 30 days. How do you determine what it is? You look for the moon after the 29th day. If you see the new moon, which would look like a backwards capital C, if you see the new moon, then this means that tonight is the first night of the new month. And if you do not see it, then it means that you complete 30 days. So tonight is the 30th, and the day will be the 30th. Then after that, there's no 31st. Automatically, you would enter the new month. The Prophet ﷺ said, as was narrated by Imam Malik, لا تصوموا حتى تروا الهلال. Do not fast until you see the crescent, meaning the new moon. Do not fast until you see the crescent. وَلَا تُفْطِرُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْهُ. And don't, so this was to do with the beginning of Ramadan. And then he spoke about the end of Ramadan. He said, وَلَا تُفْطِرُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْهُ. And don't stop fasting, don't judge it to be the end of Ramadan until you see the next new moon. What is that month? What is the next month after Ramadan? Sorry? Shawwal. So when you see the next new moon, which would be of the month of Shawwal, then stop fasting. So again, a person would go after 29 days of Ramadan, they would go and look for the moon. If they see the new moon, that would be the moon of Shawwal. That means Ramadan this year was 29 days. And now this is the first night of Shawwal, meaning the night of Eid. As for if we didn't see after 29 days, if we didn't see the crescent of Shawwal, the new moon, then we complete 30 days. Ramadan is 30 days then this year. And then we would automatically, the day after that, go into the first day of Shawwal. So you see, according to what the Prophet taught, alayhi salatu wasalam, it is, you cannot know when Ramadan is a week before the moon sighting. You can't. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, go after 29 days and have a look. So you cannot know 2 or 3 days beforehand. A person, if let's say, you're in Sha'ban now, let's say on the 26th of Sha'ban, a group of people decide that, okay, when are the school holidays? Right, okay, when is this happening? When is that happening? Okay, it's more convenient, let's do Ramadan on that day, let's pick a date. So they say, Ramadan is starting next Wednesday. You can't decide whether Ramadan is coming next Wednesday, next Tuesday, because 29 days haven't passed. The Prophet instructed us, alayhi salatu wasalam, to go and look at the moon after 29 days. And someone might say, well, in some institutions, why do they print calendars a week before? Why do they announce a week before that Ramadan specifically is on a certain day? The answer is, well, this is not correct. Because that's not what the Prophet taught, alayhi salatu wassalam. We'll go more into that, inshallah. He said, لا تصوموا حتى تروا الهلال. Don't do a siyam, don't start fasting until you see the crescent, the new moon. And he said, ولا تفطروا حتى تروه. And don't end Ramadan until you see the crescent. Then he said, فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ. And if you go after the 29th to check, and it's cloudy, you don't see the crescent. Or for whatever reason it's dusty, you don't see the crescent. He said, فَأَكْمِلُوا عِدَّةَ شَعْبَانَ ثَلَاثِينَ. Then continue Sha'ban, that we're in now. Continue Sha'ban for a 30th day, and then automatically, the next day after that would be the first of Ramadan. It's as easy as that, as simple as that. And anybody can do it. Anybody who can see, and they know which direction the sun sets in, and they know what they're looking for, which is a backwards letter C. If they see, they can go and they can look for the moon. And we're going to talk about now what happens if they see the moon and so on. But this is the methodology of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. The Prophet did not say, alayhi salatu wassalam, if it's cloudy, then rely on the astronomers. He didn't say, if the astronomers say that visibility is not possible, if they say that it's impossible for the moon to be visible because it's so thin. The Prophet didn't say that, alayhi salatu wassalam. He said, go and look for the moon. Someone might say, well, what if we don't see it? You know, the Prophet told us, alayhi salatu wasalam, if you don't see it, complete 30 days. And then the next month will begin automatically. So, if a person goes to look for the moon, inshallah there'll be more details about that soon. We're going to go and look. We're going to go and look for the moon as we do every year, inshallah, after the 29th. So we go, we arrive there in a high place, and then we remain there for about 40 minutes after the sun sets. It remains quite bright actually after the sunset for about 20 minutes. It can remain quite bright. You remain there for about 40 minutes because the moon, it doesn't appear straight away, because when the sun goes down, it's still very bright. And sometimes the gleam or the shine, let's say, or the beams of the sun, they can overcome the thin moon, so you won't be able to see it. So you wait for a little bit. That's when the new moon usually appears, if it is to be seen. Now, the Prophet instructed us, alayhi salatu wassalam, as was narrated by Al-Bukhari. He said, "Inna ummatun ummiya, la naktubu wa la nahsub." He was talking about moon sighting. He was talking about the moon and seeing the hilal in this context. He said, we are a ummah, a nation, ummiyah. And he explained what this word ummiyah means. He said, la naktubu wa la nahsubu. He said, we do not carry out calculations to try to determine the beginnings of the months. Even though, you know, some of the great mathematicians, they were Muslims. The great, innovative mathematicians who proposed theories and formulas that are used until nowadays. About 1,000 years ago they proposed these things. So it's not a case of, do the Muslims have knowledge of mathematics or not? No, this we know. But the Prophet told us, alayhi salatu wassalam, that when it comes to determining the beginnings of the months, we, even though we could calculate, we don't rely on calculations. Rather, he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, ash-shahru hakadha wa hakadha. He said the month is either 29 days or 30 days. After saying, we are a nation that is ummiyah, la naktub wa la nahsub. We don't do hisabat. We don't do calculations to try to determine the beginning of the month. Rather, the month is either 29 days or it's 30 days based upon going to look for the crescent. This is what he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And one of the scholars, among many of the scholars of Islam, according to the Hanafi school, the Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali school, according to all of the schools of thought of Ahlul Sunnah, they said that we do not rely upon calculations to determine the beginning of the month. We do not rely upon that. If a person wants to use that, but to get an indication, okay, but they still go out and look for the moon, fair enough. But to abandon, as many people have done in these times, they've abandoned going out looking for the moon. And this was a tradition that was upheld and is still upheld in many Islamic countries, towns and villages, where the people of Egypt, the people of Morocco, the people of Al-Andalus, Spain, they would do this. The people of Mecca in the past, an entourage, if you will, would go out to a certain area in the city or the town or the village, and they would take dates with them, they would take other things with them, and they would stand there looking for the moon, because it's something rewardable. Because, and I didn't know this either, that the moon sighting for every month, not just Ramadan or the beginning of Eid, moon sighting for every month is a communal obligation. So just like, you know, or like when we pray, you pray for yourself, don't you? You pray al-Dhuhr for yourself. This is a personal obligation, a personal fard ayn. There's something called fardu kifaya, which is a communal obligation. What happens if a person doesn't perform an obligation? Isn't it that they'd be sinful? Yes. And if a person, if they are in a community where that community doesn't fulfill this communal obligation, then they'd all be sinful. It's a communal obligation for each community to go and look for the moon to determine the beginnings of the different months. not just Ramadan. So in the past, whole villages, they would go on the 29th, especially when it came to determining the beginning of Ramadan. But other than that, they had people who had been chosen, that you three are going to go and check this month, you five are going to go and check this month, and so on. But when it came to the beginning of Ramadan, or determining its beginning, or an Eid, people would go out and they would check, sometimes in their hundreds. One of the historians, he writes that he was in Morocco or in Damascus, and the people came prepared, because in those countries they usually see the crescent straight away. So as soon as they'd see the crescent, they'd give each other Mubarak, and they would have a drum that they would hit so that the next town could hear that they saw the moon. They would also have cannons, sometimes cannons, that they would fire something out of. If they saw the crescent, they would fire it, and the other neighboring town would hear. Sometimes they would have a beacon. If they saw the moon, then they would light that beacon, and they would become ignited. And it would be on the top of a hill. And they could see it for miles, 50 miles sometimes, they'd be able to see it. The next town would see it. So that meant that the moon has been seen. And they would light that beacon as well, another 50 miles, all the way up and down the Islamic world. This is how it would spread. But this was a time when a lot of people took care of this issue. And again, the Prophet ﷺ explicitly said, "La naktub wa la nahsub." We do not use calculations, even though we have the knowledge to do that. There are many intelligent Muslims, many Muslims who study maths, even here in the West, to degree level and beyond. They have PhDs in it. They know what they're talking about. They could, the Muslims could. We have these people among us. But the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, the method for determining the beginnings of the months is by going to look for the moon. Because everybody can do that. Everybody can do that. The farmer who's been living off his land for the past 70 years, who perhaps didn't go through the school system, he can do that. The elderly woman who's raised 7 children, who didn't go to school, even she can do that, because it's easy. That's why the Prophet ﷺ was given the order by Allah, tell your nation such and such, that this is how they determine the beginnings of the months. Some people say, but look, we have so much technology nowadays, why can't we use the technology? Well, the Prophet said, do it like this. And then it's not that the Prophet, it's not that Allah didn't know that there was going to be all this technology and this technological advancement and satellites. Of course Allah knew. Allah is the creator. Allah eternally willed for this to be, for all of these technological advancements to occur. But despite all of that, still Allah gave Prophet Muhammad ﷺ the order to order his nation to go and sight the moon. So in doing that, we follow the Prophet ﷺ. And whoever has abandoned that practice, then they have abandoned something that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ ordered us to do. So that's as far as the sighting of the moon goes. So sometimes you hear about, oh, the moon was seen, perhaps you hear, the moon was seen in Huddersfield. Or has that ever happened? No, for Ramadan, maybe not, maybe. Because we live in the Northern Hemisphere. Or it's heard that it's been seen in Morocco, it's been seen in Nigeria, it's been seen in South Africa. Okay? So, the scholars said that, especially the Hanafi scholars, okay, they said that if it's seen, if the new crescent is seen anywhere on the earth, anywhere, absolutely anywhere on the earth, it could be in a different country, They could be in a different continent. They might be 8 hours ahead or 8 hours behind. That makes it a little tricky, but still, let's say there were 8 hours. There's an 8 hours time difference. That's how far away it is. If it reaches you in the proper way, the person was trustworthy and reliable, or we're going to mention details about who sees it. If the news reaches you in a reliable way, then you fast. So these are known as global sightings, where someone around the world sees it. Let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 3 brothers. They're actually your brothers. Okay? They decided to go to perform al-Umrah. Or they decided to go to Al-Madinah to visit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? Which city are they in then? They are in Al-Madinah. Which country is that in? Okay? And they're your brothers, remember, these 3. Okay? So then they see, after the 29th day, they see the crescent. Okay. And then they call you, they message you, this reaches you in this reliable way. Okay, that the crescent has been seen. They actually saw it, nobody else. They saw it. So you've got this sighting now from another part of the world. So what does that mean now? That means you can take by that global sighting and you can fast. You can start Ramadan. Or if it's the end of a month, you can end the month. It doesn't matter where the sighting comes from, as long as those that witnessed the crescent are trustworthy and reliable. The reason why I gave the example of your 3 brothers, for example, and being in Saudi Arabia is that a lot of the time you hear the people say that we don't take sightings from Saudi Arabia. Okay? And there are reasons, we'll explain why. We don't usually take sightings that are given, that come out of Saudi Arabia, that are given by the Ministry of Religious Affairs there. There are some issues. But if you were to go to Mecca or Al-Madinah and you saw the crescent there, that's a sighting from which country? Saudi Arabia. I'd be fine with that, for example. So it doesn't matter where on earth it is seen, as long as it reaches you in a reliable way. This is known as a global sighting. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, radiyallahu anhu, the one that heads the Hanafi school, which most of the Indian subcontinent follow and are part of, he said that we rely on global sightings. And that's fine. So if somebody wants to rely upon that, that's absolutely fine. And it's not a condition when it comes to global sightings for that place where it was seen to be in the same time zone. It's not a condition. Sometimes you might hear that, well, it was seen in Morocco, and we can take by Morocco, but we can't take by other places. No, you can take by other places. It's not a condition for it to be in the same time zone. Morocco, Nigeria. No, it's not a condition. Then you have some other scholars, and these are the Shafi'i scholars. They said that every locality goes by their own sighting, or the absence of. So they said you can't take by global sightings. So fair enough. There's a difference in opinion. Some scholars said you can take by global sightings, and some scholars said you cannot take global sightings. In general, now going on to talk about when Ramadan begins. Ramadan, they would begin by completing 30 days of Sha'ban. So like I said, let's go all the way back. If 29 days of Sha'ban have passed, and we go to look for the moon, We don't see it. What do? We consider this night to be the 30th night of Sha'ban. When Fajr occurs, the day will start. What day? The 30th day of Sha'ban. And then after that, automatically, the next night is the 1st of Ramadan. Okay? That's how we know. So we didn't see the moon at all. Okay? The second is if the crescent is seen. So after 29 days, the sun sets. You go to see the crescent. And it looks like a backward sea, and you see it. You actually see it. You now have seen the new moon of Ramadan, and you are obligated to fast the next day. You, personally, because you can't rely on what you've seen. You must fast the next day. Even if other people don't believe you, you would fast the next day. And then, let's say, after the 29th day, you went and the sky was not clear. You went and the sky was not clear because it was dusty, it was cloudy, there was a sandstorm or something of that sort. It was raining really hard and you couldn't see the sky. So the sky was not clear. Then in this situation, if one person who is considered Islamically trustworthy, meaning they're not an enormous sinner, one person, whether it be man or woman, one Muslim who is an Islamically upright Muslim, meaning that they are not a major sinner, if they see it, if they see the crescent of Ramadan, then they are to be relied upon. They are to be relied upon. In this situation, the Islamic judge, he would judge Ramadan to have started. And then whoever hears that, they would be obligated to fast. In the next scenario, if the sky was clear, imagine now, you went out to look for the moon after the 29th day. And there's nothing that obscures a potential sighting. The sky is clear. Then here, if one person says, I saw the moon, and all the other people, let's say there were about 20 of them, one person says, I saw the moon. And they asked the rest of them, and they were like, no, I didn't see it. I don't know how you saw it, but I didn't see it. Okay? Then there's obviously a problem. How can, when the sky was clear, completely clear, only one person saw the moon? And all the others, their sight was fine. So it means that that person has a problem. There's an issue there. So this is not taken as, we don't judge Ramadan to have started. The Islamic judge, he only accepts the testimony of a large group of people, because if the sky was clear, everybody would see. Like say, look, there it is. So he only accepts the testimony of a large group of people, because the sky was clear. And if there is no Islamic judge, of whom there are none in this country, actual Islamic judges, scholars, and there is no Islamic ruler in the town or the city, then a trustworthy and pious Muslim is given this position. So he would declare that Ramadan has begun, based upon the sightings and the different rules that I mentioned just now. The conditions of fasting. So these are conditions for the validity of fasting. These, let's say, boxes need to be ticked for the fast to be considered valid. Firstly, a person has to be a Muslim. That's obvious, isn't it? Okay. If a non-Muslim, if someone has an acquaintance who is a non-Muslim, and the non-Muslim sees that you're fasting, and they want to participate in that, they say, I'm not going to eat anything, I'm not going to drink anything, I want to experience what you experience. It's obvious that their fasting religiously would not be valid, and they wouldn't be rewarded for that either. They would actually be sinful. Why? Because a prerequisite for the validity of fasting is to be a Muslim. They need to fulfill that condition first. Otherwise, like I mentioned earlier, what they're doing is an invalid worship. It is ibadatun fasida, an invalid worship. So they'd be sinful. So we don't say to non-Muslims, fast like us. No, they're supposed to embrace Islam first. Otherwise, they are disobeying Allah by not doing what is given priority. So that's the first condition, to be a Muslim. Next, a person must be sane. So not insane. The insane person is excused from fasting, just like the insane person is excused from prayer. And another condition of the fasting is to be mumayyiz. Mumayyiz means to have tamyiz. To have tamyiz in the Arabic language, specifically in the terminology of the scholars, it means for a person, usually a child, to reach a stage whereby they can respond to questions based upon their understanding. So they have this mental capacity to respond to questions based upon their understanding and deduction. So this usually happens at the age of 7. For some children, it happens at the age of 6, perhaps even 5. It's not merely, what's your name? Ahmed. No, not like that. Or what's your mom's name? What's your dad's name? Where do you live? No, not like that. These are things that the child knows. But something that the child would be able to reach the answer through deduction. And this is actually the same, it's the same rule for a child praying. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Muru awladakum inda sab'in." He said, order your children to pray if they reach 7 lunar years, which is 6.5. 6.5 in the years that we usually go by. 7 lunar years. If the child reaches 7, plus they have a tamyiz, they have this ability, okay, then it is an obligation upon the members of the household to order the child to pray. Otherwise, the members of the household are sinful. See, understand this, that the child is not sinful. Because the pen is lifted for the child until they become pubescent. So let's say even if the child didn't pray, the child wouldn't be sinful. But if the parent or the grandparent or whoever the child was with at that time, if they neglected ordering the child to pray, then they would be sinful. And the same goes with fasting. With fasting, this rule of fasting is understood from the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, Muru awladakum bis-salati inda sab'in. Order your children to pray when they reach the age of 7 lunar years, with this added condition of being of understanding. Such that if a person doesn't order their child to fast when they believe that the child is able, the child can withstand a bit of hunger. Then this parent has not fulfilled that duty. The parent would be sinful. The mother, the father, if they didn't do that, they would be sinful. And likewise, there are other things like that. So, what happens is that you would find, I'll give you an example of myself. Sometimes people come to me and they ask me, can you check if my child is mumayyiz? If my child has reached that stage at which they are of understanding. So sometimes, subhanAllah, I used to ask them a certain question, but then the children who are that age, they talk to each other. So those who have not reached that age yet, they would tell, he's going to ask this, the answer is this. Right? So I used to ask them, how many times does Jumu'ah come in a week? They'd say 1. I'd say, okay. How many, if there are 4 weeks, how many times would you pray Jumu'ah? So some of them are not ready. So some of them would say 7. Some of them would say 6. Some of them it shows that it's very simple. 4 weeks, and I wasn't even trying to make it hard. So, and sometimes some children are just a little confused. They might have that, or they're nervous. Sometimes they're really nervous when they come. Sometimes what is done is, in the past, the scholars said that what you can do is, you can agree with a shopkeeper that you're going to test your child. And this is the benefit of living with people who have Islamic knowledge. Because this is, one might say, the culture, in one sense. So you agree with the shopkeeper, and shopkeepers would know this in the past. People would come to them with their children all the time. You say to the shopkeeper, I'm going to send my child, and don't really sell to him, but I'm going to give him £1 and sell him the bottle in appearance. Apparently sell him the bottle for 60p, and then don't give him any change. Okay, and see if he questions it. Now, yes, some children, they would go and you give the £1 and take the bottle, and he would tell them it's 60p, and they'd say, yeah, here's £1, and they take the bottle and go home. So then they would learn that, okay, the child is not there yet, okay? Or sometimes, you've got to do a few tests, because sometimes children are just nervous. They're really nervous about handing over the £1, taking the bottle, and running home, right? They completed the test. But some children, they will say, no, you haven't given my change back. So then the shopkeeper gives 30p back, and he says, no, you didn't give me my change back. And like that. Now, the best one is, subhanAllah, one of the ones that our sheikh used to do. He used to do it with Lebanese liras, so the currency over there. So, to give an example in pounds. So to say, I had once 2 young girls, they may be 7, and a boy. So I said to them, okay, here's a £5 note. And here are 5 coins. So I was playing it as well. I said, this is 1 note here, and didn't give much attention. I said, there are 5 coins here, 5 of them. Which one, if you were to buy one type of sweet, which one can you buy more with? So straight away the girl said, the coins. Straight away. And I didn't say anything, and I was looking at the boy. And the boy, there was things going on in his mind. So he was thinking, and he said, but. And then he looked at the girls, and the girls were so sure that he said, yeah, the coins. He came back and said, no, the coins. So, this is the type of thing that you do to see if they are of understanding. There are children who are, some are 5 years of age. And I remember asking her this same question. She said, it's the same. And she looked at me as though she was saying, are you serious? She said, it's the same. I can buy as many with this as that. You're not fooling anybody. So, a tamyiz is this, having this mental capacity that a 3-year-old doesn't have. Even though a 3-year-old responds to instructions, open the door, close the door, come here, don't do that, don't do this. but they don't have yet this mental capacity. And interestingly, it's at this time when the child has tamyiz that the devil starts to whisper to them. At this time, because before that, even the devil's like, because the devil can't manipulate or persuade or entice, because the child doesn't understand. So it's at this time that the qareen, that the devil, each devil that is with a person, a devil that is with each person, it starts to whisper to them at this time. So at-tamyiz is something very, very important, because otherwise, if a child is not mumayyiz, if they don't have this mental capacity, then we're not allowed to order them to pray. We're actually not allowed. Why? Because they don't differentiate between worship and playing. You see sometimes when a person might be praying and the child is jumping up and down and so on, because they don't understand. But once they have tamyiz, this means to differentiate. So once they have this tamyiz, then they are able to differentiate between what is praying time, what is actually prayer, worshipping Allah and so on, and what is considered playtime. So that's another condition of being, the validity of fasting. Another condition for the validity of fasting is that a woman is not menstruating and that she is not experiencing postpartum bleeding. However, these women would need to make up the missed days. So it's different. A woman in this situation, if she's experiencing her bleeding, then these days that she misses of fasting, she makes them up. With the prayers, it's a different issue. And finally, wudu and ghusl are not conditions for the validity of the fast. So let's say a person didn't have wudu, they can still fast. Let's say a person needed, whether male or female, let's say they needed to perform the obligatory ghusl for the reasons we're going to mention much later. If they needed to perform al-ghusl, still they can fast. They can start their fast and perform ghusl later. Okay. So among the conditions of fasting Ramadan to be obligatory, among the conditions for fasting of Ramadan to be obligatory, are for one to be a Muslim, sane, pubescent. So first we're talking about who are the people who, if they fast, the fast is valid. That's even children. But who is obligated to fast? Someone who is actually pubescent and physically able, and not a traveler. A traveler doesn't have to fast. We'll give details of this next week. But when it comes to ordering the younger child to fast, then this is something that every parent knows. Every parent knows how much their child can bear. So the child might start off fasting, and then they might feel that they can't bear it. Okay, if the parent feels that they actually can't bear fasting, it's hunger, it's not pain, it's hunger a little bit, then they would say to them, fine, you can eat something, we'll try tomorrow. And like that. Some people, some children, they might be physiologically weaker than others. So they don't fast. But it is something good when the whole household fasts and the child is encouraged, and it's said to the child that, yeah, subhanallah, soon you'll be fasting with us, and the child wants to wake up for sahur and so on. And this is something that is encouragement that is encouraged in itself. Okay. Insha'Allah, in our next session, we will speak about the traveler and what it means to travel and when the traveler is allowed not to fast, And we will also speak about the intention of fasting and when one should have this intention, and so on and so forth, inshallah. We will stop here today, unless there's an announcement. So, inshallah, the next class is going to be in Ramadan itself. And the classes are moving to another day. They're moving to Sunday. So the next class won't be this coming Sunday, but the one after. So, I don't know what the date is for that. 17th? 17th. As for this Sunday, which is soon there of course, we will, insha'Allah, be going to sight the moon locally. And the details of that, insha'Allah, will reach you soon. But we will be going, insha'Allah ta'ala. And it's good for the children to come along. It's a good atmosphere. It's something rewardable. Even if we don't usually see the moon. But maybe we will this time, insha'Allah ta'ala. But it's something rewardable. One thinks about all those people that are disobeying Allah and abandoning this practice that the Prophet ﷺ instructed. One thinks about that and then says, no, I am going to do what the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and I'm going to instill this within my children also by taking them along with me so that they can see, so that it becomes something like second nature to them. Like, we go every time to see the moon, every time it's Ramadan. We need to instill these habits within our children. We need to exert an extra effort to put these habits into the hearts of our children. Okay. Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha